Hi, my name is Jonathan Zanger. I'm the president of Walker Zanger. I had a great time doing this podcast. It was an interesting process, made me think of some things that I hadn't thought of in a while, and I certainly recommend it.
Mr. John Zanger, I appreciate you so much for being on the podcast.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, so I was told this is your first ever appearance on a podcast, huh?
It is my first
Erica's
appearance.
done a couple.
Uh-huh.
So I want to get started with this is a family-owned business. So it's very intriguing to me to see a business get so large, like turn into a dynasty when it started from just a family home. So tell me a little bit about the startup phase of the company and, you know, the ups and downs that you experienced as a kid. How you saw it all take off?
Well, it started before I was born.
Okay.
So back in 1952, in another era, my father and mother were immigrants, war refugees, came to the United States when they were both, came separately to the United States when they were both older teenagers. And my father was born in Belgium, and during the war was a refugee and went from Belgium to France, and France to Spain, and Spain to Portugal, and Portugal to Mozambique, and Mozambique to the United States, all along the way picking up languages. So by the time he got here, he probably spoke about seven languages.
That's great.
And picked up some more, later on when he joined, was drafted into the army and served in Germany, picked up German later on in the aftermath of the war. So when he got out of the service and wanted to start in business, he, because he had all these languages, went into the import and export business. And because he had spent part of his youth in Portugal, was interested in importing stone, marble from Portugal, because the story goes that when they first came to Portugal, he thought that the country was very wealthy, because in Belgium, only the king had marble and stone, and in Portugal the streets were paved with it. And he said to his mother, "Boy, these people must be really rich." And she said, "What makes you say that?" He goes, "Because their streets are paved with stone." And she said, "No, they're not rich. They're poor, actually." He said, "But stone is cheap here. It's easy to come by." So that stuck with him, and when he got out of the service and went to work for another company, he wanted to develop that business, doing business with Portugal, spoke the language, and he did so, but the owners of the company at the time were not interested in further financing the business and growing the business.
The company that he worked for.
The company that he worked for.
Okay.
So he decided that he would go off on his own and start a business. And the Walker and Walker Zanger was his partner, who worked in the same office, and heard that he was going out on his own and said,
Let's do it together.
I'd like to join you. And the two of them each put up $1,000.
Wow.
And decided that they wouldn't take any money out of the business for a year, wouldn't take salaries, anything. Both their wives at the time were working. They didn't have families yet. So the wives supported them, and the rest is history. They put together $1,000 each, which is all the money they had, basically.
I mean, back then it's a lot of money.
Back then it was a good amount. It was a good amount of money, and they were able to do it. And my father had a very good connection with the largest stone company at the time in Portugal. And in those days, you wired things, or you telexed, and he wired the owner of the company, or the manager of the company, and he said, "I'm going into business on my own. I need your, I need your assistance. Can you help me out?" And the guy said, "What do you need?" And he said, "I need credit." And the guy wired back, and he said, "You have unlimited credit. Go sell."
Wow.
And that was it.
That was a massive connection right there.
And it was good timing.
Yeah.
And little by little, they grew the company.
So you growing up in this family, was the company something like, did you see your father a lot? Or was he always working?
Yeah, he worked long hours.
Yeah.
And my parents traveled quite a bit too. So they would go on these, because he was sourcing all around the world. By the time me and my sister were kids and growing up, they would take these extended trips, sometimes 4 and 5 weeks at a time, usually twice a year, maybe one to Europe, one to the Far East, or one to South America. And our grandparents would stay with us. So, they traveled quite a bit. We went with them on some trips when we were kids. So my first time to Europe was when I was 5 years old, and it was sort of, father was on business, and we were tagging along with my mom. So it was a family business. There's no question about it. And he worked very long hours.
Sure.
But we didn't completely miss him. He was usually home for dinner.
That's good.
So we just ate late.
Yeah. So how is it growing up in a family that's so devoted to what they're building? I mean,
well, it was for me. It was good. I think my mother. They both loved the business.
Mm-hmm.
They loved the travel aspects of it. It was successful, which of course was a big thing for them. They both grew up in deprived circumstances, obviously during the war. It was a very different time. They were both refugees. Both of their families were murdered. In many cases, not their immediate families. They survived. Both their parents survived, but many of their relatives were killed. So anything was better than that.
Yeah.
Obviously, and they were successful. And they grew up, with a very much of a culture of hard work, and passed that on to us.
Mm-hmm.
So although so we were aware of the business as kids, and although we didn't, it wasn't kind of like a mom and pop store where we were working behind the counter. Although I did work some summers at the company offices. But yeah, we were very much aware of the business, and my parents were, both dedicated to the company and really made very, very important connections and friendships with both clients and suppliers. So those people, I grew up, knowing a lot of those people, and those people were not only clients or suppliers; they were social,
like family friends.
Yeah. So it became, an interesting part of the family.
That's cool. So growing up, did you ever notice any certain hardships that you saw within your family, and if so, how did that affect you?
Sure. I mean, there were times, certainly, when the business partners broke up and went their separate ways. That was a time of I know a lot of stress from my father, and before I joined the business, there were certainly downturns, in cycles, in business cycles. And there were times that the business wasn't doing well, and times when it was doing very well. So we noticed them, but I don't think that was it was generally. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, when for the most part, with some exceptions, there was a lot of growth in this business and where we were, obviously in 73 with the oil crisis and all that. There were tough times, but the business was generally growing during those times.
So what are the biggest lessons that you kind of took from your family and apply it today in your business?
Certainly the value of hard work. There were a couple. The value of hard work was a big lesson, and my father had very high standards of ethics and honesty and treating people the way you would want to be treated. And we try to run the company based on those standards today as well.
Sure.
Creating value, doing, servicing our clients, being fair to our vendors, suppliers, supporting other people who want to grow businesses. We've been fortunate to work with a lot of startup companies and small companies, craftspeople, and develop them so that they have now big companies and they've become very successful. And whether or not they,
so you guys collaborate with
we collaborate
smaller companies to help them grow?
Absolutely. Smaller companies and sometimes individuals.
Even if it's not in your industry?
No, well, generally in our industry,
Okay.
obviously. But even if it's something related. But generally in our industry, there's a lot of craftspeople and artisans in our industry, and we try, if we find somebody who's got a good idea
Unique
or a good
touch.
talent, or an interesting, perspective, we try and figure out a way to sort of weave them into the fabric of the company.
That is so intriguing. So you guys kind of I wouldn't even call them competitors in a sense, but kind of help other.
And sometimes
Yeah.
competitors too. I'm happy to at this point in my career especially to help other people. I've been very active with the trade association. I was the president of what's now the Natural Stone Institute, which is the biggest trade organization in the country for the stone industry, and a lot of that is about mentoring other people in the
I
industry.
love that because there's so much abundance in this world. I feel like a lot of people need to learn from that.
Sure.
There's so much success to be created for people that the way I look at it is the more you help, the more you'll gain from it.
Yeah, and this business is thousands of years old, so
Yeah.
it's got a there's a history here and a tradition of mentoring and of developing the industry that goes back a long way, starting at the pyramids and maybe even
Sure. A long time ago. So growing up, did you ever see yourself doing anything else?
I did. I always knew that this was here,
Yeah.
and I think that I knew that it was a wish of my father that at least one of his kids would go into the business. But I neither did I feel really pressured to get into it. My road to this business really was, the way how I knew I wanted to get into the business was really when I was in college, in university. I took a semester off in Oxford, and afterwards backpacked around Europe like so many other kids did, and I stopped in Italy because I wanted to go to the quarries, because one of my earliest memories was going to these marble quarries when I was 5 years old for the first time. So I decided that I wanted to go there, and I ended up in Carrara, which is where the quarries are, where we had an office, and expected to spend a couple of days there. It's on the beach, it's in a beautiful area, the mountains in the background, the beach in the foreground, and the Mediterranean, so thought I'd spend a week in Italy and a couple of days in Carrara. I ended up spending 3 weeks in Italy and a week in Carrara, and I kind of fell in love with it and said, when I'm done with school, I'm gonna live here, and I'm gonna learn Italian, because I spoke Spanish at the time pretty well, and but I wanted to learn Italian.
So how many languages do you currently speak?
My English and Italian are my best languages. I get by in a couple of others, Portuguese and Spanish and things like that. But my fluent languages, I guess, are Italian and English. So I decided when I graduated college I was going to live in Italy and work in Italy, and I looked around for jobs, but I didn't speak Italian at the time. I didn't have any papers to work there, so my ticket to living in Italy turned out to be working, in cutting stone, and working in a marble factory, and it was great because that was an area of Italy, where they speak sort of mostly pure Italian, not a dialect, although they do have a dialect, and it was a beautiful area. And in those days, no internet. In Italy, there were 3 channels. They were all in Italian on TV. If you went there and you lived there, you had to speak. It's like getting tossed into the fire.
You had no choice.
And you had no choice. So you learn really quickly.
Sure.
So I worked in a couple of factories while I was there. I was there for a year and learned the language and learned the business. And by the time I was done with that year, I decided okay, this is what I want to do. Came back to the States. And
So when you first got
decided-
into this industry, it wasn't with your parents? Or-
Well, no. So I was working for a couple of suppliers and people that my father knew through the company. And then when I came back here, my father had a partner here in Los Angeles, and I flew out here and lived here for half a year and learned some of the technical aspects of the business from somebody who worked for the company, for his partner. At that time, there were two separate companies, and his partner ran the company out here. Ultimately, we sort of consolidated everything into one. So then I worked out there, and then I came back to New York, and I decided that I wanted to start up a new division, and in fact, ultimately started another company with some friends, or guys who I met in New York who became friends, and that company developed that company, and then ultimately merged everything together at the end.
Yeah.
Bought them out. They remain friends to this day, these partners, and sort of merged all the businesses into one.
So talk to me about the relationship you had with your father when you were working with him, because I find that to be very intriguing.
It was intriguing, and I think I talked to a lot of people about that because those relationships can be
Tough.
difficult.
Yes.
And been through some tough patches, but in our case, it was a really good relationship, and I think it's because he sort of let me let me pick out an area that I wanted to concentrate on and devote myself to that with as little interference as possible. And I've had friends and acquaintances that I know that have been sort of, micromanaged by, there are a lot of family businesses in this industry, and have worked under, a family member, and it's been really difficult.
100%.
In our case, it was much easier, and years after I started, we were chatting one day, and I said to him, there was a particular instance, I don't recall to this day what it was, but I said, you must have seen that I was screwing this up. You must have seen this mistake and that mistake, and why didn't you, how did you keep yourself from stepping in? And he said, listen, I let you make mistakes because that's how you learn. And if I saw that you weren't learning from your mistakes, I would have stepped in because I wasn't going to let it go on forever.
Sure.
But as long as I saw that that you learned from them,
adjusted,
you don't
fixed.
forget that kind of lesson.
Yeah.
It's important to let people make mistakes because otherwise they'll never learn. Or it's one way it's the best way to learn.
It's a very important leadership lesson.
That was a great lesson. And to this day, I practice that with my own employees. You got to make choices. Hopefully, you've made them with some, with reflection and the proper thought. They're not always going to be right. The best major league hitter only gets a hit 35% of the time, right, or 40% of the time. The other 60% he misses. And if you can have a decent batting average, and mitigate your mistakes and build on your successes, that's great.
What matters is the macro level.
Yeah, ultimately that matters, and also learning. Experience. There's no, in this business and in many other businesses, there's little. There's little better than experience to make to really excel.
So, as somebody who operates a business at this size, from a leader standpoint, what are top qualities somebody in your position needs to have to be able to operate at a high efficiency?
Well, the best quality, I'd say, and I've plenty of qualities that I lack, and I've lacked this sometimes. But the best quality is to assess those qualities that you don't have, to look where you need, to see where you need assistance and help, to find the right people to surround yourself with and give them the latitude to do their best job. So, part of it is learning when to keep your hands off and when to put your hands on. But, like any other business, surround yourself with people who want the best for the business, who are passionate about the business, who are who have the, you know, who work well within the culture, who, you know, have, who align with your goals, and if you can do that, you know, then hopefully you'll be successful. Obviously, hard work is, you know, there's no
Nothing beats hard work.
There's no substitute for hard work in our business, and it's a tough business right now. There's so many changes going on that, like any other industry, our industry is going through profound changes, and they are in some cases existential, and you know, we're trying to navigate through those right now.
Sure.
So you know, so it's I think the best, you know, certainly the best advice is to listen to a lot of, you know, to a lot of voices, and then, you know, ultimately pick out the one that sounds best.
That's beautiful. So speaking of changes, let's talk about social media for a little bit. So how is that impacting your industry, and what are you guys doing to? I mean, I'll give you guys props. You guys are very modern with your approach. You know, from our perspective, seeing different companies who are just too, I guess you can say, stubborn to understand the change and the way things are moving. And I can understand that, you know, for as many years as you've been working in industry, you're like, this is working for me. Now all of a sudden I have to change everything. So when it hit you, when did you first realize that, okay, I really need to do something about this? And what is it that you guys are doing there?
Well, we've realized it for a long time, but we've stumbled, and we haven't done. You know, I think that's a place where we weren't. You know, we're considered in many respects to be an industry leader, and certainly in our product development. You know, so we're always sort of a step ahead in introducing new things. In social media, I would say that hasn't always been the case. We had a sort of a breakout website a long time ago, but, you know, and we recognized the importance of it, but we didn't recognize a lot of the power and the potential for it early on. And we have some legacy aspects of the nature of our business that, in some cases, precluded us from maximizing the potential of social media. We're a distribution network. We decided not to sell directly on the internet, and there's, you know, all kinds of reasons that you can say,
Sure,
we're not ready for this. But ultimately, you know, I think we finally decided some time ago that we have to. And we're in the midst right now, and it's been a year. We're about to launch our new website any week now, and that will be a departure from our current one, but still not where we want it to be, because there's going to be some further build out along the way. But I think we realized rather recently that we needed to step it up in terms of social media, and we hired a new director for PR and marketing, who's been charged with doing that. So I wouldn't call us by any means the leader in our industry. We're fortunate in that our industry is kind of
dinosaur.
Yeah. It's very traditional, especially the stone portion of it, being in the tile, and therefore we were kind of, you know, we didn't have to rush.
You have some time.
We had some time. We fell behind. I'd say, you know, I really, if I look, you know, critically at it, we should be a lot further along in, you know, in terms of social media and work with influencers and things like that than we are today. But, you know, we had the advantage that there's a lot of companies that are way behind us.
Yeah, no, definitely. So how do you see social media helping you guys out?
Certainly there's some great advantages to social media these days. You know, you can get the word out easily, much faster, much less expensively. Yeah, it's not a day when you'd spend $20,000 on an advertisement in a magazine, or or more than that on a TV commercial or campaign, and hope that it worked. You know, the data is
pretty
impressive.
solid. Yes,
it's solid. You know if something's working very quickly, and if it's not working very quickly, it's a great way to get ideas out there. For a company like ours, it's also, you know, we have to be, you know, on our toes, because while, you know, social media, you know, levels the playing field in many ways, and smaller companies than us can have a much, kind of a huge impact on social
they're very
media,
agile.
whereas bigger companies, move, often at a slower pace. And so it's not only, an opportunity, but it's also a danger. We'll lose ground. So we have to be conscious of it and work hard at it. But I think, but if we do it right, there's some great opportunities there to reach people that we might not normally reach, and to get feedback that used to take a lot of
community insights.
A lot
That's
more
huge,
time.
yes.
That's why we started. In many ways, we went from a wholesale company to a retail company, and we have retail showrooms around the country to get that kind of real-time feedback from people walking into a showroom rather than going to a dealer. Now,
Just do it online.
people don't go to the showroom so much anymore, and those have become sort of, we have to figure out how to change showrooms to a different model. It used to be that we'd have every piece and every part in a showroom because everybody wanted to see all those pieces. Now they see them all online before they ever walk into the showroom. Now the showrooms have to be a little more about, how do these things look all put together? How often can you change them up? What's new? What's exciting? How, all about how can you help me design my space? How can you, what can you offer me that I can't find online? By being face to face with a salesperson or a designer.
So the experience, in a sense.
It's the experience.
Yeah. It's becoming like retail is becoming this. It has to be like a theme park.
Well, I just read an interesting article about two companies. It's a really very interesting article about experiential retailing, and that two companies who failed at it, and at the end of the day, you still have to make a sale.
Yeah.
And people, there's all, it's fraught with danger too. You don't want to be a theme park where people come in and enjoy the experience but purchase
don't
elsewhere,
buy anything.
but don't buy anything because that pays the bills. And I think looking down the road, personally, I think there's it's unfortunate because a lot of retail is going to change, and there's going to be a lot of pay to play in the future. That retailers can't afford to give the kind of service that they used to give, and the things that we're doing for free these days. I think probably 10 or 15 years from now, or maybe even sooner, people are going to be paying fees to get that kind of service.
Such as what?
Well, so you'll come in here and we have salespeople who will design a room for you. And they won't charge you for that. They'll assume that you're going to buy the tile from us. When they do it, they'll put everything together for you. That is an expensive,
process for you guys as a company.
It takes many visits. There are changes, and there's nothing to stop somebody from coming in and taking those designs and walking down the street or going online and finding something for a couple of dollars cheaper. And it happens. It does happen. We hope that that people respect that that we're performing a service for them. But I think there's a lot of places where they can't afford to do that, and you're going to end up paying for it. So I think the retail industry is really going to change in that respect.
See, that's where I think social media comes in, gives you that edge and that advantage to kind of show off the things that you guys do special, completely different than everybody else, to attract the certain people that don't even know things like that exist.
Right.
So like it's all about, I mean, that's personally why we even do this, because like this is where the digital age is moving.
Yeah.
Like I know for a fact in 10, 20, 30 years, someone's going to look back at this interview and say, that's how the whole thing started. What an interesting journey it's been. Documentation is like super key. Yep. So, talking about the very interesting story that you have, by the way. I love how a family business, it's strapped down to where it is today, and it's succeeded. So what do you think, what is it that differentiates your family from other companies or businesses that, pretty much stayed small? Because I know a lot of family businesses, it's tough, as we said. It's very tough to grow, especially with the relationships, the morals, the values, to keep that all intact. Is there certain things that you guys still do internally as a culture to kind of make sure that everybody's on the same page, communication is clear, everyone's efficient with their job?
Sure. We're constantly trying to do those things. Part of it is the hiring and retention process. Now, and we talk about these things all the time. We've got today somebody in our Houston branch is celebrating their 25th year here.
Oh,
We've got, I don't recall the number, but we've got, over 15 people that are 30-year veterans.
Wow.
So we've got a lot of, now sometimes that's a good thing and sometimes that's a bad thing, right? You can get stayed, you can get stale, and you've got to bring in new blood and bring in people who are going to look at things in a different way. But we do have this long culture. Mike Bastone, who is our VP and on the board of directors, he's second generation. His son is now working here. So we've got three generations
amazing.
in one family working for the company. That helps tremendously. You can't, you certainly can't replace that. So that's where the culture, shows through. At the same time, the downside of that is changing things when they need to be changed, and they do need to be changed all the time. Sometimes can be a little more difficult because everybody remembers this is how we've always done it. This is we
and all of a sudden there's like this new thing.
And then when you got to do something differently, everybody's kind of like, why do we have to do that? Just like you said before. And how does that affect the culture? You don't want to lose the good parts of the culture, but you don't want to keep the bad parts or keep the parts that are no longer effective. So it's just a question of pushing and determining, trying to figure out what those what you have to jettison and what you have to keep, and working with that.
Is there ever a time where, and this is purely just a question for my out of curiosity, where a process is perfected? Or is it always just trial and error, and see what works and what doesn't, and just continue to evolve?
Well, you don't know if it's perfect until you try it. I think we develop a lot of product here. So we design our own product. We have it made for us. That's the perfect example because that's, a single thing. And of course, and I can't, it's very rare that we get it right the first time, right? You put something together, you go to a manufacturer, or we have our own factory for ceramic tile in Mexico, and we make our own stuff. You do it, it comes out, you look at it, you're kind of like, it's not just right. Let's go back to the drawing board, or we need to tweak this or turn that or change this. It's the same thing with processes,
sure,
and the same thing with marketing or anything else. It's rare that you get it right on the first time. Sometimes it happens. You hit a home run right out of the box, but and that's great. But I don't know how to replicate that. If I did, we'd be a lot bigger than we are.
I don't even think that's kind of remotely possible because we're human.
Yeah.
And we're created to learn and evolve. And it's, as you said, the importance is that you learn from your mistake and you move on.
Yeah, and you know what you like. You don't necessarily know what the market likes. When you get to a certain size, you can be a tile company that does one thing and does it really well. And, or a stone company that does one thing. You have a quarry, you have your stone. People react to it, people like it, it's great. People don't like it, it's great. And you can stay small. And there are many days, I got to tell you, that I wish, we were back to, the size we were when I first started.
Small business.
Yeah, because it's less headaches.
It's quick, easy. Yeah.
And, and it's just, it's easier. So you can do that. At the size that we've become to, we have to appeal not only to the client that likes what we like, but we have to appeal to a number of clients. What's important to us is not, I can say that I like contemporary architecture, for instance, and that's my personal taste. That's not to say that I don't appreciate beautiful classic architecture, but I tend to like things that are more contemporary. But around here, you see a lot of things that are not contemporary. So if you have a building or a home that's classical, or that's Mediterranean, or that's colonial, we have things that go with that. We want to make the best thing for that.
Yeah, it has to fit
for that aesthetic.
Needs,
we want to make something really nice for that. May not be what we,
like
what I like, or what my designer likes, or what but we want to appeal to that. So it's not about at our level. It's about the process and the desire to give the client, what they're looking for, and then improve on that. And give them something, extra. I'm looking for a subway tile. Well, there's a million subway tiles. This little, rectangular tile. you know, I can go to Home Depot and buy a subway tile for $1. You know, how come yours costs, you know, $20 or $9 or $8 or, you know, $15? Well, this one is handmade and it has this and then the other, and there's some variation, and, you know,
So it's a detail.
you know, at one tile maybe you're not going to see it, but when you see it in your, you know, it's a beautiful piece. It's like, well, I can buy a T-shirt that's, you know, it's $15 and it's still,
It
you know,
wears.
covers up, right? Or I can buy one that's, you know, $150 and, you know, one maybe cashmere or silk or something like that, and it's different than the one that's cotton. And that's not to say that we don't sell a little cotton here too. We do, but we also sell a lot of cashmere.
Sure, it's an art. It's art in its own.
It is art.
Yeah.
You know, that's what we want it to be.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
And when that happens, it's a great thing.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna wrap this up. What's one piece of advice for everybody that's listening on a quality that a leader? I know we kind of touched on this, but I kind of wanna, you know, have like revisit this on one. Out of every single quality that a leader should have, what's one that you would really double down on?
I double down on mentoring and developing other people, because, you know, that's what leadership is all about. You can be a great business person without doing that. You can be an artist and just work alone in the studio and be the most successful guy in the world. But, you know, Da Vinci, Michelangelo, you know, they had studios. They didn't do, you know, he didn't paint that whole Sistine Chapel, you know, on his own. Michelangelo, he had some help. And if you find willing and talented people and you can mentor them to be better than you are, you know, that's great. Then
Don't let them do their
then you
thing.
can sit on the beach and relax. I haven't gotten there yet, but that's a goal.
Almost there. Well, hey, John, thank you so much for being on the show.
welcome.
I really appreciate it.